Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Emily Butler. I'm the curator of the Platform Talks program. Welcome. Before we start, I wanted to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, the Anishinaabe, and it is now the home of many First Nations, including the Inuit and Métis people. As a newcomer to Canada, I wish to contribute towards truth and reconciliation, and I understand that one of its first steps is a process of learning or relearning. And I hope that the Platform Talks program here at Art Toronto is a chance to learn together, to look ahead at the challenges on the socio-political landscape, and to think about how we can build a better, more resilient and representative art world together. I'm really excited to welcome two artists today who are working with textiles to revisit historical narratives around gender and race. I'm thrilled that Michaëlle Sergile is joining us here, and Simone Elizabeth Saunders. The panel is moderated by Ikiriko, who's a curator at the pioneering artist-led space TPW here in Toronto. Before I hand over to our speakers, please do join me in giving them a very warm round of applause and enjoy the discussion.
Hello. Oh, these are nice and loud. I just wanted to thank Art Toronto, Savannah Moore and Emily Butler and Mia Nelson for inviting us to be here. And I want to thank both of you, Michaëlle and Simone, for joining me for this conversation. I think we really want to keep this very casual and really fun. I really want this to be conversational, that we're just in discussion about these amazing artists' practices. So to begin, I thought it'd be great if we could just provide folks with a sense of your process, of how you've been developing your work, and kind of where you are now, from kind of where you started to where things are going for both of you. So I'm going to start with you, Simone.
Hey, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us. It's really beautiful to see some familiar faces and some new, and I'm really excited to share my process with you. I hail from Mohkinstsis, which is Calgary, Alberta, and I was born and raised there. I did live in Toronto for nearly 8 years, so this is my home away from home. It feels really good to be here and to be celebrating with all these eclectic and vibrant artists here. My practice, I create tapestries, textiles from a punch needle. I evolved my work learning on the tufting machine and then really developing my craft with the punch needle, which is the analog tool. It's a handheld, really slow and steady device that I create my textiles with. And actually, one of my pieces is gracing us within this space today. It's just behind us. It's called Girl with the Butterflies. And all of you on the right may not be able to see it now. It's just behind that little wall. You'll have to go take a look afterwards. But the premise of my work, I uplift Black womanhood, melanin women, and I really investigate things that I love. Storytelling, folklore. I develop a lot by, reaching into the historical canon within the Renaissance and Art Nouveau and developing new narratives, new fresh narratives, and considering Afrofuturism and really creating what I call my ancestors, our ancestors, and creating a sisterhood of works that I'm really proud to share with you. And I think that that's my intro.
Thanks, Simone. Michaëlle?
Yeah. I'll do the same thing. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here with us on Sunday. So my practice. Maybe I can start by saying that I do not have the traditional background in textiles. I've learned how to weave on the corner of a table with a friend and a beer who just told me, this is how you do it. You have to put this like this and create this like that. And honestly, it was a great moment for me because I discovered something that I'm passionate about now. And textile weaving has so many different signification for me. I think, especially me, I wanted to work on different discourses that were often in the margins. And I thought, well, textile is also a medium that itself is being put in the margins. It's often categorized as being art craft, as being something that is feminine, that is not in the art world necessarily. I know that now it's changing, but when I started working with textiles, my whole idea was to think about stories that are untold with a medium that is itself in the margin. And in French, there's also a lot of things that are connected to the lexicon of weaving. We think about, we say tissu social, social fabric. Métissage means the mixture of culture in French, but there's also the word weaving, which is tissage. So there's a lot of things that for me made sense, especially me wanting to think about identity, wanting to think about different histories that are untold. It just made sense to continue on that direction. And I don't know, there's something really poetic with textiles as well, because the further I really dig into understanding textiles, and then I realized that even the words that we use to say the crossing of threads, we call that an armory, une armure, which is very close to anything that is related to resilience and power and making sure that we talk about some communities. Yeah, I don't know if I should say more.
That sounds like a great place to start. I have a series of questions, and I'd sent them to you both, but I think I'm just going to hop around because of what you just said. So I'm really thinking about history and how it shows up in both of your practices, and that there's a revisiting and also like a re-envisioning of Black female histories. And so, Michaëlle, you have this personal and socio-political weaving of cultural histories, and through scale and structure, it feels like you're creating archetypes out of the subjects that you're representing. And Simone, there's often like this lush kind of depictions of the natural world, regal symbolism, vibrant, saturated colors. And so I'm curious about the role of the fantastical that kind of plays in your work, and the way that you're recontextualizing fables and folklore through that lens. And I feel like you're responding to classical archetypes. So I'd love to hear both of you talk about kind of that formation or revisiting of archetypes in your work.
That's a really beautiful question. Thank you. When I approach my work, it really is an investigation of discovery. And being a mixed-race Black woman, having landed in Canada and being a part of the diaspora, it's really important for me to create a sisterhood when I am creating my work. And so it's like, in and of itself, I'm building my own community. But it is a search for belonging for me. And so when I was growing up, and I went to theater school upon graduating high school, and I was really invested in the theater world. Myself and 4 other Black women, we started the first Afrocentric theater company in Western Canada called Ellipsis Tree Collective, and it was really such a beautiful thing to discover Black plays and to start to produce them in Western Canada. And for me, it's been really about that, is bringing Black joy and narratives within the forefront. And at the time in the theater scene, the colorblind casting was really just a budding notion. It wasn't something that was truly happening. And so for me, when I came to Toronto, and I worked with Obsidian Theatre here, which is the Black theater company, it really became clear to me that I wanted my own autonomy and independence within my own voice. And so I went back to art school, went back to Calgary, went to art school, but I still had such a connection to the Renaissance and to Shakespeare and Molière and all of these, these great literatures that I studied in my theater practice. But for me, it was kind of discovering how my love for the Renaissance, when I think of all these stories and the opulence and these great tales that were being told, these narratives were standing on the backs and necks of marginalized people, and the erasure of certain histories and of my history. And so for me to really still be in love with this era and with these narratives, but then to pull it forward and to really put within the Black female body, and within that my culture, my Jamaican heritage, and to have that, ring forward with so much love and devotion. That's my word of 2024, is devotion to myself, to my body, to world peace, to healing, to being present. And a lot of the mythology and the folklore does come from the Jamaican culture, thinking about the Anansi, the story of the Anansi spider or Duppies, and kind of playing with those. And of course, the vibrancy of the Caribbean. So color to me is so enigmatic of emotion and storytelling. And it's really fun for me to play at my loom to really develop color and how they come together and vibrate. Like the threads, when they nest together, they vibrate together and they nest together and they, synchronize. And so a lot of the fables and the mythology that I draw from comes from my own personal interest, comes from the Renaissance, comes from fairy tales, and then to really pull that and marry that with the Black female body and uplifting of joy and strength and resilience. Yeah.
It's interesting because I love the, there's some really interesting connections between your work and also very different directions that both of your work go in. And so when you were kind of talking about color, I was just thinking, Michaëlle, your work has kind of these really beautiful blues, like these deep kind of, I would say maybe like somber colors. And your reference, is often through older analog technologies, through photography and film. Like I'm thinking of the James Baldwin piece that's where you can see the glitching of the TV screen. So I'm curious about your relationship with color. And also there's the work, I'm sorry, I don't know the name of it, but it's the large 2-panel weaving, I believe it's of the children, and the back is like a negative, like a photo negative. So maybe could you talk about your relationship with color and that relationship with photography?
Yeah. At first, I have a background more in psychology and sociology, and then I decided to become an artist. My parents were not necessarily happy at first, but now they're really happy. And since I had this background, I was really into contextualizing everything, having books, having authors, and just like Simone, I was really into telling a story through another story. And for this piece, for example, it's actually a photograph that came from the basement of the Union United Church, which is a really big space for Black communities in Montreal. It's the oldest space that still represents Black community in Montreal. And when I saw this image, I just really wanted to learn a bit more about Black communities in Montreal. I came here around 2002, so my background and the things that I've learned from Black communities in Montreal was basically from me digging, trying to look a bit more into these histories because I didn't learn anything at school. So I searched in books and try to find people that could tell me those stories. And Nancy Oliver Mackenzie is someone who really introduced me to a lot of stories in Montreal, and that one was a really important one for me. And the idea of having it black and white is mostly because the photos that I use are very old and they're not necessarily black and white. They will be most of the time sepia, like a reddish color. but I decided to weave them in black and white and having this idea of a negative on the other side. The negative is actually created by the fact that I'm weaving with one thread at a time, and when I weave with more threads, then the back of the image completely changes. But I wanted to present the works always in a setup that they can be circling around by the public because of that aspect. I think it kind of talks also about the idea of time, the idea of argentique photography, and I really wanted to present it in a different format. And just to give a little backstory for this image, which is one of the most important images that I've woved for this series, it's an image that it was in the basement of the church, like I said, and it was this photograph with a grid next to it, and all these kids had numbers on their chest, red numbers, and then on the grid, the people from the church, Miss Nancy, they asked everyone to write their names because they couldn't retrieve all the names I think there were 78 children, if I'm not wrong, and they were trying to remember who were these people because it was taken in I think, before the 50s. And so it's from the people in the church, coming to the church, going to the basement and writing name after name, all the names of these children to remember who they were, and then having a story to tell. And for me, that's also the beauty of art. It's kind of a way where you can assembler, like you can assemble? Mm-hmm. Yeah, assemble. It's always the easiest words. Assemble and have a community really be able to, even through oral histories, you can retrieve some names and retrieve some stories. And for me, it was one of the biggest piece that I did because it was my first entry into understanding the many layers of having someone telling you a story and then sharing it with you, and then you being able to share it with a larger public and have these conversations. So yeah.
That's so beautiful. I'm thinking about how both of your practices are very physical, like in terms of using a punch needle and the repetition, and then working on a loom. Like you have on your website a video. Well, actually, you both have videos of you in process, which is really amazing to think about the connections to also histories through oral histories and all of these different embodied ways of either remembering or honoring our pasts. And so I'm just thinking, and also the fact that it's textile work. So there's this real tactility to engaging with your work and having a sense of our, like when we're looking at your work, that we're also embodied in connection to the work. So I'm kind of curious about how you're thinking about these relationships that are really rooted in craft, which has traditionally been women's work, and how that kind of carries through in terms of the research that you're doing, and finding ways of kind of emphasizing like Black feminist historical narratives and ways of working.
I feel, that for me, the medium that I use, the punch needle in particular, was invented in the late 1800s, and it was a tool that was made for leisure and for, the creation of, seat covers and pillow cushions and little ornament rugs. And for me, that idea of leisure in the early 1900s was predominantly catered toward, domesticity of white women. And so for me to take the tool and to have that meditative quality as a Black woman, it's restful in the same time that it is rigorous. There's a lot of dichotomies within this craft, from pulling from the darkness toward the light, and using a soft material that has such powerful connotations to it and is rooted for me within a powerful history. And so, that within itself is a resistance and that within itself, creating these works that embody so much joy and strength. And for me, again, that search for belonging and wanting to connect to my ancestry, having not known my paternal grandmother and great grandmother, and really not knowing my lineage, and honoring that. My studio has become such a sacred space. And so the ability to be able to work so slowly and watch these pieces develop, there's an honoring in that where I literally invite my ancestors to channel through me. And so that's why I call my works, when I refer to them, I call them the ancestors.
Do you want to?
So the question was about
Kind of the like tactile quality, as well as the histories of the process of weaving. Like, I'm curious if there's a connection with like your matrilineal line, or we're thinking through kind of histories of craft.
Yeah, I mean, I've discovered pretty lately that my family was connected to textile. I didn't know. I really was interested in textiles because, like I mentioned before, it's a medium that itself was very much categorized as being something like craft and not necessarily du grand art. And in terms of the work itself, I'm a very impatient person, and I chose the medium that is quite intense and really a lot of labor, but I actually really like it. I think it forces me to slow down. It forces me to think. It forces me to also try to deconstruct the things that I've learned. I feel like at school we're always into like productivity and making sure we're always like going, and then with textiles I'm kind of forced to slow down a little bit and try things out, and if it doesn't work then maybe it's something else. And I've really enjoyed this process, and I don't know if everyone's familiar with weaving looms, but the one that I'm using is called a jacquard loom. So traditional weaving looms have many petals, and then it's connected to a lot of threads. But the one that I'm using, it's one petal, and it's the same action of weaving the thread and then pushing on that petal. So it's a lot of labor in the sense that you're doing the same movement for thousands and thousands of times. And even my gallerist, Hugues, is always asking me questions into like, how do you do this? And then how long does it take you? So how many threads are in this one? And every time I tell him, he's like, oh, wow, okay, so that's a lot of threads. That's a lot of work. I'm like, yeah. And that's also the reason why I want to take videos and show people the process, because a lot of time people think that it's printed or I just push a button and then bam, the artwork appears. But no, it's more than that. And I love the idea of seeing like all my little mistakes that I guess no one sees but me, but I see it. I like the idea of having the threads hanging on the side. And usually at school they told you don't do that. You're supposed to put it back in the thing so that it looks slick and everything is perfect. But I like the idea of having the threads hanging. Well, you can see the tension that I've put in that thing, and then you can see like if I use more threads, then the threads will fall down on the floor. And to me, it's not a mistake. It's not something that I want to repair. It's something that I want to be shown. I want people to see the work of my hands on the textile piece and to see that it's someone working behind all these little stitch that made this work alive. Yeah.
I've been thinking a lot about that in terms of the fact that there are so many that we'll see at Art Toronto, there's so many artists that are working in very tactile aspects because we live so much online, and the way we consume information is just so fast and overwhelming, that it's so beautiful to have opportunities to slow down and to acknowledge and register process, and that I think that tactile and textile practices really do that. Like, you see, even I watched your video with the loom, and I'm so fascinated by weaving, but I still don't actually understand what happens. and the same with punch needle. Like, I'm like, I watch it and I'm like, it's incredible, but what we see is the labor and the time that goes into this work. So I'm curious if you feel that some of the reasons you've leaned towards these practices is because of this time that we're in, where we are living so much online, and we have such an emphasis on things being very quick and very fast and immediate, and yeah.
I mean, definitely. I think I'm proof that my work forced me to slow down and forced me to just put my phone away, put everything away, and just focus on the work that I'm doing. But also, it's a pretty meditative work where I sometimes even just put my headphones on and trying to listen to James Baldwin talk forever. And that led me also to try to do the pieces that I did and deconstruct the pieces that I did. I think there's a force in textiles. There's a force in creating something that you can just work thread by thread. And I mean, I've been following you, Simone, as well, and just trying punching needle. I can't. I tried punching needle and the thing couldn't stick. And I thought, okay, she's patient. She's extremely patient, because I guess we have our mediums for a reason, but I couldn't do it. And thinking about doing this process again and again and again, and the work you do is amazing. It's a long process. I think it forces us to think about the work that we're doing in the process and maybe changing what we thought we were going for, changing the first idea of, I want this image to be this way and perfect that way. And then you realize while doing it, then maybe I want to go to a complete different direction. And I don't know, I feel like textile offers that possibility.
Mm-hmm. Textiles have a beautiful way of slowing you down. And I feel like when I am at my loom and I'm using the punch needle, you know, it's not like a painting where I say, okay, I'm going to have this gesture here, this, you know, blockade of color, this movement. And then it's like, okay, I sit down and I'm like this, like every little punch. And so even developing that movement and that gesture takes me several weeks to do. And it really does equate to life and being present and honoring, you know, the gift of being able to do something that takes that kind of labor, and to develop it slowly and to watch it transform. It becomes an energy unto its own self. You know, it's I really exude a lot of energy into it, but then when I get to encounter them afterwards, they really do, they have their own synergy that I have developed in connection to the ancestors and to connection to all of the research that I've done. And when I am sitting at the loom, I'm very cognizant of, you know, taking in positive energies, of listening to Black authors on tape and the music that I'm absorbing, Miles Davis, Alicia Keys, like Queen Latifah, all the vibes, but definitely I'm very conscious of how powerful art can be and the emotion that it can carry. And so it does slow me down from the fast pace of the online world. But then at the same time, when I am sharing my process on like social media, people are very interested, more so, in the process of how it's being built. And so I'm happy to have the ability to share that. Because you see it, and some of them are 70 inches squared, and just to really recognize the labor that it did take. And so, you know, I do have a book coming out in the next few months, and so I'm really proud to have, to really share my anthology of works. And so that is in collaboration with Contemporary Calgary. And I have some fabulous people in Toronto who have helped me to create this book. And yeah, it would be really, I can't wait for it to be shared and accessible for people.
That's really exciting. And I think that kind of leads me to thinking about community and the different ways that we're connected locally in our home places as well as through online, through social media, and having a book come out that we can then all share in this. This is really exciting. I'm thinking about the fact that, so you're mixed Jamaican, grew up in Calgary, you're Haitian and have been in Montreal since 2002. I grew up in Saskatchewan, Nigerian and mixed, and when I was growing up, like I was a part of a very small Black population in Regina, and I went to the same school that Simone went to in Calgary, AU Arts, and I found that there was a very small Black community that was really connected, but I really think about now that I've been in Toronto for 22 years, my relationship to the kinds of work that I make is influenced by the fact that I'm supported by a greater community of Black artists and makers and scholars. And so I'm curious if you are conscious of the ways that being in Calgary and in Montreal have impacted the work that you're doing, and how that has influenced you, or and if that's something that you want to reach across or internationally, like what how your community supports you.
I can go. Okay. You know what? Growing up in Calgary, my father, when he came to Canada, there was many Jamaicans who he knew who then landed in Calgary as well. And so I grew up in a household that really embraced my culture. I mean, Jamaica is this very small but mighty island. And I think the influence of the music and literature and cuisine is something that is globally recognized. And so for me, that was something that was really honored in our household, you know, Rastafarianism, and really living that airy and vibrant lifestyle. And so I did learn a lot from my father in terms of my culture, but it was still very isolating as a young girl growing up and not having Black friends. We did grow up in a very, multicultural community, but even still, that search for belonging for me is ever present. And I think as devastating as COVID was, there was some small blessings that came out of it in terms of building globally and having those connections and being able to do studio visits online. And that connection really grew. And especially support from Black women and Black curators, women. And, even still, I will find a specific curator and they're following me, and I'm just like so honored and touched by that. And so I do feel like a huge embrace in that sense. And the discovery of my work, especially from the Black community, is really supportive. And I had a show at Contemporary Calgary, the local beautiful museum in Calgary. And when my show went up, Unity, the Black community was so supportive. They had not seen traction like that before within the gallery. And so it really is such an honor to know that that is a part of my legacy, and that is it. That I can't describe how touching that is to know that young Black and brown children can see themselves within these institutions and can start to recognize that anything is possible, and that they are being seen.
Where can I start? I mean, when I was at school, to be honest, I never really had examples. We did talk about BIPOC artists, but it was rare. We talked about things that I felt wasn't necessarily representing me. And I think seeing that artists do have a platform and are able to share their work, share their thoughts, I thought, okay, then I need to do something about my own communities and make sure that we talk about them. So the whole idea of Untold Stories came from my own untold story, thinking that I'm not represented by the things that I'm learning at school. And for the work that I'm doing, I do feel supported. I think I've seen the support recently. I had support from different people, not necessarily from my communities at first, but it came very rapidly. It came really fast the second I started talking to people and realizing that it's not because you feel alone that you're actually alone. And for that show, for example, it was a really beautiful moment for me because it was my first solo show in a museum, and it's still on. It's my first show in a museum, and I wanted to talk about unnamed Black women. I had the opportunity to dig in the archives and the collections of the McCord Stewart Museum in Montreal, and I thought, okay, well, I will talk about women, Black women that are in the photographs. Tell me anything. Is there anything that I can find to talk about Black communities in Montreal? And unfortunately, they had a little amount of things, and the only things that I could find was women that were nursemaids without any names, so they weren't even identified. And so I decided, well, okay, that will be the name of my show, The Unnamed Women, and I will take the time to make sure that we honor them, that we talk about them, and then maybe we can find some way to recognize them, to write their names. And honestly, the biggest moment for me was the opening. I was extremely shy. I couldn't even go upstairs. I stayed downstairs because there was a line, and even Hugues told me, you got to go upstairs, go see it. And I felt so shy, but I felt really supported, and seeing that everyone was really cheering and being so happy that even though we don't have their names, the fact that we're talking about them really made a difference. And another thing that I don't think is a surprise for a lot of people, the security guards in a lot of institutions are BIPOC people, or in that institution there was a lot of Black men, and they came to see the show, and every time I would come in the museum, they'd be like, Michaëlle. I'm like, yes. I'm like, you did that. I'm like, yeah. And like, your little thing, you did that. You look like a kid. I'm like, sure, thanks. I'm not a kid though, but I do look like a kid. And every time they're super happy and really proud, and we take the time to have these conversations, and honestly, I was even more proud to see that they were so happy about this. And every time we would come and I would just see them, even just walking on the street, and they'll be like, hey, and I'll be, hey, we know each other. I don't know, there's something really interesting to see that a show can touch people from different generations, different backgrounds, and having these conversations really helped me. I think we also always want to have like a solution for something, especially when I create exhibitions like that one. The first question that people ask me is, are you hoping to find their names? Are you hoping for this and for that? And I mean, yes, obviously I do want to find their names. I do want to identify them. But the moments that I had with the public and with people around the show was pure joy for me. And I've never felt as supported as this moment. And yeah, I think it also opened a lot of conversations between institutions and communities in general. I think there's a distance that needs to be touched, a distance that needs to be discussed. And I was really lucky to have people at the museum being so open on having these conversations. And we're hosting different events. That is, well, the goal for these events is to create a bridge between communities and institutions and make sure that we have access. I feel like it might sound silly for some people because we're all art lovers, but it's not everyone who's comfortable going in a big institution or comfortable to go in a museum and thinking that they will be represented. So having opportunities to be in a space where you can bring people from the church, for example, and different spaces and see that they can have access to these spaces is important for me. So I was really grateful to have this opportunity to create this show.
I think it's so beautiful that you both talked about the work that you're doing, but also, Simone, that you talked about being a part of a legacy, like that you are a part of it, and that your experience, like I can imagine that feeling of you're doing the work that you love and that you want to do, but then really the fact that you are actually making change, right? Like you are really transforming a sense of connection and community for so many people is really profound. And I imagine a very emotional experience when you've got droves of people coming out and, big up in you. So, and yeah, I'm so grateful that you're doing this work too. And I think it's really important in specifically too, and like in certain places too, that where there hasn't been this history kind of told and reflected on, like in Calgary and in Montreal, where it's so valuable. Even I think when you said like of course you want to know the nursemaids' names, it's also like, these are like flags, like these are points that then can be returned to, and that's so important. And I think that the ways that we think about history are changing, and that it's kind of building, like planting these seeds that can be returned to in the future. I think maybe I will ask one more question and then open it up to everybody. So actually, I'm just going to ask about your influences in terms of what's really exciting you right now, whether it's music or readings or other artists or what. Oh.
Okay. I'm a big fan of Isaac Julien. Am I saying it properly? Everyone says that I have a French accent. Isaac Julien. I really like his work. He's an amazing artist. I think he's a great example of things that I'm trying to do. Keep trying to do is to think about different authors, different people that changed history, but thinking about a different angle of their lives. A bit like the James Baldwin work, where I thought about him not only because of his words, but his whole presence, his gestures. I think Isaac Julien is a great person to really push into that direction, and thinking about Frantz Fanon, for example. What was the background of Frantz Fanon? We know him as being this sociologue, this psychiatre, but do we know him as a husband? Do we know him as he just goes into different angles that really made me interested in his work. And I'm also really interested in architecture in general and different spaces and music. That's something that I was talking about with friends. I'm really interested in music and sound and trying to not necessarily create new music, but having Haitian music, because I'm from Haiti, and having this being either slowed down and really like in reverberation, like you can hear all the sounds from the music, because Haitian music is pretty, it's rapid, it's really fast. So having this idea of slowing it down, it creates another sound then. So I'm really interested in using technology to create different narratives with something that already exists. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, there's so much inspiration. I mean, from diving into the historical narrative of the Renaissance, of Art Nouveau, and bringing that forward within my own inspirations. But for me, the artists that I really gravitate towards, Michaëlle Thomas, and her form of resistance and building community, especially between Black women, is so beautiful and ever inspiring. And Wengechi Mutu is another artist that I really love to follow, and just the way that she explores the Black body is just otherworldly and so captivating. And for me, it's being present in investigating my culture and folklore and mythology and reading. I read a lot and I listen to podcasts. And so for me, it's really about being ever expansive. And right now it is again a journey, and I'm focusing on this book and really being inspired by the women who have helped me within that. Julie Crooks being one, and how much she is influencing at the AGO and within the community here, and how that is rippling across across the country, and you two, and being inspired today by you both. And so, yeah, thank you for this opportunity and for listening to my process and hearing about yours. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. Okay, so we can see your work, Michaëlle, at the McCord Stewart Museum in Montreal until January
12, I think.
And Simone, your book will be launched.
Should be in a few months here. It's in the designing stages, so I will blast it out on all my channels however I can and do that.
Excited. Thank you. All right. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi.
Hi.
Have the two of you ever thought of collaborating and doing a piece together with kind of your vision and kind of melding them?
We have not. No, I mean, this is a beautiful new budding friendship that we have together, and we've definitely admired each other from afar. And I was thinking a lot about how my tool, the punch needle, is very accessible. I mean, it's something you can buy at the local crafts store, you know. It really is. I can bring it with me. And then I was thinking about Michaëlle and how you, like, the jacquard is a very complicated and very sought after machine that is very expensive. There's only like a couple in the country in itself. And so I did want to know more about, like, I'm sure you have to have residencies to work on this machine, and you know, that also, like, that anticipation of having access to the loom itself.
Yeah, I mean, no, we haven't thought about collaborating. Yes, I am thinking about collaborating now. But yeah, I mean, I think it would be really interesting. And like you said, it is very difficult to have access to the jacquard loom. I am traveling a lot just to go weave, but also it forces me to meet people. But yeah, I would be really interested to learn how to punch needle. As I told you, I'm really bad at it. I tried and it didn't work. I don't know if I was doing a wrong thing, but it could be really interesting to mix different textile approaches. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll ask a question. It seems quite daunting for young artists to imagine being here on the platform at Art Toronto. Can you give some tips to young artists who would like to see themselves shown at an art fair and the journey to get there?
Be yourself, and dreaming in itself is a form of planning. That is a Gloria Steinem quote for you. I was always a daydreamer, and I think that is a big component of my work is me. It's a mirror of myself within the work and things that I enjoy and am inspired from. So I feel like the world wants to take a lot from you and from young people, and the expectations on young people. And, you know, we're living in a very fractured and vulnerable world right now, and there's a lot of expectation of our young people. And so I think it's really important for them to honor who they are and to hold that close and to keep their playfulness and their creativity close at heart too. And I think that then they will flourish if they stay curious and investigate on the things that bring them joy, because that's where the magic happens, is being playful and vulnerable all at the same time. Yeah.
I don't know if I can add more than that. Maybe just that it took me time to, I think I'm still processing that. It takes time to feel comfortable, but we always want to do the things that we're doing, but it's still nerve-wracking. But one thing that I've learned is someone that I'm still admiring very much. I had the opportunity to hear her talk and looking at her and being front row and looking every details of her person, and I realized she was shaking. And she's an accomplished woman who traveled internationally, she's just amazing, but seeing that she was nervous to talk to a little crowd really made me think that even the person you admire will always be a little bit nervous to be in any situation, just because there's people there for them, and just sharing their work is it's something that you put yourself in a vulnerable position still. So I think anyone that we admire, anyone that we care about can still be in that same position that we are, and it's not something that it's just us. Yeah.
Thank you all. Oh.
Hi. Thank you so much for that incredible talk. That was really amazing and super enlightening for all of us. Just a quick question about how both of you are making work that is quite labor intensive, and also like the labor that you put into it is also emotional labor. So I'm just maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing how you approach the idea of self-care so that your work and your process and yourself has the sustainability to continue on?
Beautiful question, because I think that self-care as an artist is paramount to continue to do what we do. And for myself, like on a physical level, I started with the tufting machine, which is it's a 4-pound machine, but holding that for 4 to 7 hours a day was really taxing on my body. So that was another reason why I decided to relinquish the tool and just strictly focus on the punch needle itself. So that was a form of, wanting longevity and sustainability for my own physical self. And for me, it's really, getting enough sleep and what I eat, treating my body like a temple, what I eat, how that affects my mental and physical capabilities. I practice Kundalini meditations, and so I'm able to ground myself and stay connected. Because even though when I'm at my loom, it is very much a very meditative and slow and kind of not stagnant, but I am sitting in one position for a long time. And so there is being able to do that and caring for myself to do so. Yeah.
Just like Simone mentioned, it's very intense on your body. And in the videos, if you've seen them, I love to weave standing. And even people at the textile centers where I weave, they always ask me, why are you doing this to yourself? Just sit down. Stop doing that. But I don't know, I really like the movement and being able to just, it's just more easy for me. It's easier for me. But what I do, it's an easy answer. I go to the gym. I try as much as I can. And also my family and my friends. It maybe sound easy to just talk and give a talk on a platform, but if I don't have my friends with me, if I don't have my family, then the crowd that I can just look at, I feel like I'm more tense, more nervous. And that's also the reason why I was telling that to another artist. Every time I have openings, I make sure that I have my family with me. I make sure that I have friends with me and that I can go to them and just make an excuse to anyone I'm talking to just to have this moment. And it kind of grounds me and recenter me into, okay, I'm fine, I can continue. I don't know, I think it's sometimes we go into a lot of things to make sure that we take care of ourselves, but sometimes just having a conversation with someone that you really care about feels, you get all the things that you need. So I just always make sure that I have them with me. Yeah.
Oh yeah, shout out to all the family and friends that are here. Like really, that is the support. You guys don't have no idea how much that helps us as humans to stay connected, right? And to be able to use our voice and continue to find our voice. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Simone and Michaëlle. This is beautiful.